All right, let's take this discussion further then. We are joined via Zoom by Robyn Pasensie. She is the party funding researcher at My Vote Counts. A very good afternoon to you, Robyn, and thanks for joining us here on SABC News.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. I want to talk about the article that you've recently written entitled Taxpayers Deserve Accountable Public Political Funding. You do, of course, in the article make reference and clear up the fact that unlike private funding, which is regulated by the Political Party Funding Act, public funding is not regulated by one clear piece of legislation. Let's talk about your thoughts then and why you push on this importance of public funding having to be, I'll use the term, regulated.
Well, I think first and foremost, what is important to note is that our political parties, they receive two bits of funding from the public purse, so that's our taxpayer money, you and I, and then from private funding. Now, we've just heard this prior to this discussion. Some politicians say, well, it's just not enough. Everything is coming in and it's cutting our funding. But when you actually look at the numbers, these are exceptionally high numbers, large amounts of money that is being funneled to our political parties. But yet we are faced with this issue of our politicians telling us, well, we don't actually have money to do anything. So why is that the case? And I think that is precisely the reason why we push on the need for accountability and transparency. So we've come some ways in terms of private funding. But as I said, that's just one part of it. There's this whole other bit of public funding, and it's regulated by many pieces of legislation. It's very difficult to actually get hold of the reporting structures for these various bits of public funding. And at the end of the day, it's us, so the African taxpayer, that's actually shelling out this money. Yet we have no actual recourse for trying to find out, well, what are our political parties, what are our politicians doing with this money?
Yeah. What do you make of, and I don't know if this is a valid argument to this, but, we've heard the ANC, for example, saying that the reason why they are cash-strapped is because of this newly implemented Political Party Funding Act. Is that a justification for us being in the dark?
I mean, I think the answer there would just quite simply be no. Just to reference that article that was mentioned about explaining this is the ANC's issues and this is the funding that we have. In that very same article, Pule notes that the ANC's financial woes pre-exist the PPFA, but in the same breath also says that it is because of the PPFA that we have these financial issues. You can't have it both ways. And if we were just to look at the governing party and you look at their sort of funding challenges, this has been widely reported in the media prior to 2021 when the PPFA was implemented. This has been a long-standing issue. And what the question should be is, what is your financial management like? Why is it that you cannot pay staff salaries for a very long time, irrespective of the PPFA? And why is it now, in the face of a legislation that only asks for you to be transparent and accountable, as you should be, that suddenly now your private donors are shy? Why? Why don't they want us to know? Yeah. Why suddenly is there an issue in actually making that donation known? That's really all that the Act is asking for. So I think it would be unfair to level this kind of blame at the PPFA when these financial mismanagement issues are long-standing.
All right, and then the issue of the maximum donor threshold that is being supported, and I suppose you might be supporting that too. Is that not in a way helping out, let's say, the smaller parties at the expense of the bigger parties? Because no doubt the bigger parties would then be able to bring in, I suppose, more money.
Well, absolutely. But I think also what's important to understand is that the way in which the Act is drafted, we may not like it as civil society, but there are ways around that upper threshold amount actually. So let's say, for example, I have a company. I'm the director of company A. I donate 15 million rand to a party. That's the maximum. But let's say I also want to, in my personal capacity, make a donation. I can also do that. And I also have an upper limit of 15 million rand. If I have a holding company, I can donate through the holding company. I can give money to a friend, a family member. They can also make that donation. So there are ways, in fact, that you can circumvent that 15 million rand threshold. So the arguments leveled against that, I think, are also wanting a bit.
Yeah, there's something interesting that you put there in your article as one of the subheadings there, where you talk about the toxic relationship between money and politics, and I think it'd be interesting for our viewers just to hear what you have to say in terms of how toxic that particular relationship is. And of course, we've seen in many countries, I'd say all countries really, where there is that interjection
Absolutely.
between money and politics, and how they kind of move as one, and how at the end of the day it really does affect us, the electorate, the ordinary citizens. I mean, let's go through your thoughts there.
Well, I mean, I think you've summarized it already. I think the place to start off is firstly that sometimes when we think about our own political context, obviously because we live here, we tend to think that we have it in the extreme. It's really only us that are concerned about political corruption and the money really in our political game. But quite frankly, this is a global issue. And it's an issue that many other constituents, many other countries in the world are cottoning on to, that this is unacceptable. And I think I don't even have to go into exceptional detail other than to say, just look at state capture. So in the video that you played prior to this discussion, there was a comment being made about if we lower the disclosure threshold of 100,000 rand, that's kind of ridiculous because who's going to buy us off for less than 100,000? Well, the State Capture Commission made that very clear. There is a culture of self-enrichment. And that is really the issue that we're seeing. That's this toxic relationship between money and politics. Yeah. We know we need money to do things. There's no naivete around the fact that political parties must pay staff, they have overhead costs, or whatever campaigning they need to do, they need money for.
Yeah.
But the issue that we have, really what it boils down to, is me giving you money to buy influence. That is the issue that we're talking about. And I think here really in the public imagination in South Africa, state capture really shows us that very clearly. And just because we've had the commission, just because we've even had the president's report come out over the weekend about this, doesn't mean that this particular culture still does not exist. And this is really why we push on this point of accountability, because this relationship remains very difficult to properly understand, even with the PPFA.
Yeah. All right. It was such a pleasure talking to you. Unfortunately, we're out of time, and hopefully we can continue these sort of conversations with you. I'll be keeping an eye on those opinion pieces that you're bringing out. Thank you very much, Robyn.
Thank you so much.
All right. That is Robyn Pasensie, who's the party funding researcher at My Vote Counts.